My name is Ricardo Mondragon, and I'm here to talk about my journey in sound, music, and art. I am from Mexico City, and I came here to study music composition at Columbia College. Studying music was one of the best things I've ever done. It broadened my horizons, gave me different perspectives and ways to think. I have two studios, one in fine arts and the other one in music. I explore waveforms, frequency, color, light, and any material that I can get my hands on. Hopefully it's cheap, but it's usually not the case. Here's a picture of my studio. I promise I do have a piano. It's just on the left side. And it's not neglected. It's just here is where my art is born. And I play with these modules and its voltage and computers. I live in these two worlds of digital and analog. So I'm here to talk about sound as visual art. There are many ways to do sound visually and express sound visually, but this is my way and this is what has worked, and yet I have to develop. One of my biggest influence was reading this book of Harmonices Mundi, The Harmony of the World of Johannes Kepler. In this book, Johannes Kepler explains that basically there's harmony all around us. Planetary motion, they move in harmonic ways, just as our music. And I saw this. When I was studying music, I saw geometry. And I didn't know why or what happened, but it was in my brain, and I needed to express it somehow, some way. I wanted to experience and emphasize musically through delicate materials. This was an urge. And I started with two simple notes, C and F. These two notes sound like this. Together. Now, I like the sound of this, and maybe it's boring by itself, but together this music comes alive, and this distance is perfect for what I wanted to do. And not only sounds good, but it looks good, and I'll explain why. I needed to somehow transfer this sound into the computer, not just in the piano, but have a computer doing this. And the best way to do this in the computer, for my perspective, was to use a sine wave. A sine wave are waveforms that are very, very simple. And they're not only simple, but they have this circular motion. And the circular motion was what I wanted to look at and express. So how do I express this in the computer in circular motion? There's one instrument from the 1800s called the harmonograph. I don't know if you guys seen this. Most of you are familiar. If not, there's, I don't know if you remember the spirograph to the kids. Well, it's kind of like that, and it creates these beautiful shapes, and it has two pendulums, and they rotate just like the sine waves in circular motion. Let's see this video that I found on YouTube. Here, the two pendulums are rotating in circular motion and merging this information onto the paper with a pen and creating these beautiful shapes. So I said, hey, let's put these two notes and see what happens. And you get this beautiful pattern. I love this because it's abstract, but yet you have this duality of figurative and symbolic representation of the actual sound. This is exactly what that sound looks like. Let's see in a digital harmonograph. Here, I'm going to use two frequencies, the two sine waves, two numbers, two notes, and merge them together. And as I merge them, I'm trying to find this exact form. And I love it because it's chaotic, but then you feel that it's going symmetric, and it just feels good, and it's there. Now, if I thicken the line a little bit, increase the length, and thicken once more, I'll get a bit of a structure. And now I have something to play with. I have sort of a sculpture, but it's in two-dimensional form. I need to be in 3 dimensions. So what gives us 3 dimensions? The z-axis. Z-axis is what gives us depth, and we can live in our reality. So I did that with this form, and I got something like this. Now, this is all great, but I haven't gone out of the box. I'm still in my computer, and I need something to take it out. So I know that my art is bounded by technology, because that's what we have in this world, technology, and it's pushing us forward. So I used a 3D printer called 4500 Project. This huge printer is the size of a fridge, and this laser is binding all this dust into what the sculpture will be. And after 30 hours, more or less, we have materialized music. We have a sculpture that is 2 notes and is real. And I like it because there's also a theory that music not only moves in waves, but in particles. And this started with also particles. Now I have the whole music world to myself. What about chords and other tones and low frequencies, high frequencies, modulations? So I kept going. This is what an octave looks like with sine waves. This is a lateral fifth. I wanted to create more tones, more modulation, and I got some wicked results. Here's another wicked result. This sculpture is a chord, and I like it because it comes from more of a traditional sculptural background. Just as Michelangelo carved the Pietà from a single block of marble, we used a big CNC machine and a big block of ABS plastic and input the information of the music and then carved away this plastic into what is the sculpture. My good friend Jacob helped me paint it, and by painting it, we used also a computer to get the exact color that we wanted, and then mount it in this beautiful pine. This next sculpture is a 2D sculpture, and I used a laser bed. I input the frequency and then cut the acrylite to make this sculpture, and now we put it in a wood panel. This is a G minor chord. This next 2-note relationship is called the Diabolo sin musica, the devil in music. And in medieval times, there is a tritone, and in medieval times, you couldn't play this tone. If you played it, you would be basically invoking the devil, and you would be burned alive. And my theory is that if they would have looked at this, they might have not killed so many musicians. This next sculpture is called Figure 8, and I like the simplicity of it. But once we rotate it, we find that it's yet a little bit more complex than what we think, and it goes back to simplicity. This next sculpture, or piece of music, is a chord trapped in glass, and I used, again, laser to break the glass inside. And I like the analogy of having frozen music. That's why I had this glass here. And the subject matter is represented in the material. This is a painting. This is a C minor chord. And I used a wood panel and screen printing. I put the screen on top of the wood panel and then printed on top this snapshot of what a chord looks like. So far, I've played with sine waves, but there are many other waveforms that I like to play with, and mixtures of these waveforms. For me, this is an expansive possibility of sculptural form, and not only sculptural, painting, etc. So here is a triangular waveform model for a sculpture. Here's Bill helping me at the Chicago Silkscreen Company clean up a screen. I come to find out the Chicago Silkscreen Company does all the road work for Chicago, so they get plenty of practice. And they're great, and they've been there since the 1950s. I love them. Here is that same print onto aluminum. My good friend Mike is a developer. He had a bunch of aluminum and said, "Hey, why don't you use this for painting?" I thought it was a great idea. Thanks, Mike. Here's another print of a triangular waveform. What other ways I can visualize music. There's many ways to visualize sound, but what seemed logical to me was voltage. When I play with my modules, I play with voltage, and I modulate it, and you make beautiful sounds with it. So I thought of taking snapshots of this electricity, and I made a plane with a ball bearing on top and passed the electricity through this ball bearing. And we got some really cool results. This is a note. This is a high frequency, and it's just a snapshot of this high frequency. The color that you see is the actual color. I didn't touch it or do anything to it. It's the nitrogen hitting the atmosphere of this electricity. And for me, this not only represents sound, but it's eyes, rivers, veins, neurons, blood vessels. I like that it represents something else, not other than sound. Here's another ball bearing. There's a bigger one, and it's steel. You can see these ramifications. They're called streamers. So before I leave you guys, I want to talk about some work that I don't know if I ever do it. It maybe costs a lot of money, why not? But I'm not going to stop thinking about it. And I always start sketching and thinking about new possibilities. Here is acoustophoresis. Yes, that's a human being. I want to levitate humans with ultrasonic frequencies. I know this can be possible, especially with a really generous patron. Here's the bass chamber. Not only sound as listening to music, but what about sound as a sensorial experience, a tactile experience, where these low frequencies in this chamber massage your body and give you a relaxation and peaceful type of feeling. For me, what I do is very simple. I grab the simplest waveforms and transform them into art. But what is complex to me is the world that we live in, like all these sounds that we hear. Yesterday, the rain, or being at the restaurant and listening to everybody talk and fluctuate, and there's all these waves that merge and reflect everywhere. That's what's complex for me, and there's a possibility of art immensely there. So I hope that with this lecture, you go home to something to think about, and I encourage you to open your ears, and hopefully you get to see something. So thank you very much for being here.